morning. How are you guys today? Sorry I'm a little bit late. I did warn you. I got to watch the cute little neighbor boy across the street for his mom. Usually I watch him on Wednesdays, but it's usually later on in the day, but she needed me earlier today. So hopefully you guys don't mind waiting a little bit longer. If it's not convenient for you, hopefully you can watch the replay later on. But I'm excited to talk to you about today's topic. I'm a little bit nervous about today's topic, and I don't know why, because it's just something that makes sense and is logical to me, but there's really a lot of controversy about this topic that we'll get into later, and so hopefully I can ease some of the controversy and help it seem logical, as logical to you as it does to me, okay? And as it does to many other people who are traditional and traditional food eaters, real food eaters. I want to remind you that, well, I want to welcome you to day 8. This is step 8, day 8 of 10 days to real food and a healthier you. I'm super excited. I want to know how you guys are doing. Show me some love if you're loving everything that you've learned so far. If you've got questions about some of the things I've shared with you, put them in the comments. I'm happy to answer them for you. Monday's challenge was probably a little bit challenging for some of you. Monday's challenge had to do with converting from refined white sugar to natural sugar that we get from our food, and when necessary, unrefined sugar, and totally avoiding high fructose corn syrup, which for some of you may mean giving up your soda pop. And I know that soda can actually be addicting, so that Mondays might have been a little bit challenging. Hopefully Tuesdays, where we talked about water and hydration, gave you some tools to help you get over that soda pop habit, if that's one that you happen to have. And I want to remind you too about the Restart program that I'm teaching at the end of this month, okay? And I'm going to give you some more information on that a little bit later this week and give you really a good deal for being a part of my community. But the Restart program is a wonderful 5-week class. It's 5 weeks of nutrition education, and it includes, during the 5 weeks as a group, we go through a 3-week sugar detox. Now, you might think that a sugar detox means that you're just going to eliminate the soda pop and the white sugar. That's not all that's involved in a sugar detox, because the sugar detox that we do actually helps to balance and regulate your blood sugar levels at the same time. And so there's going to be some temporary diet adjustments, but oh my gosh, it is so wonderful. I don't know if I mentioned this, but my husband lost, I think, like 15 pounds when we went through it for the first time. I lost 2 inches. I've had students tell me at the end of the class that their vision has improved, which makes sense if you understand blood sugar regulation. They've had joint aches that disappear, arthritis where they were stuck like this, now they have full range of motion where they can actually write. And so there's just been some wonderful, wonderful benefits from this Restart program that I teach, and I'll give you more information on this on it probably on Friday, and I'll give you a special deal for being a Mind, Body, and Soul community member. But I want to remind you also what I've been saying all week long. You can have the best digestion in the world, premium digestion. And unless you're eating nutrient-dense food, you're going to be malnourished. Everybody understands the concept of garbage in, garbage out when it comes to a computer, and they don't necessarily understand that same concept applies to us. We can't put garbage in our bodies and expect it to perform optimally, expect us to live in good health. It isn't logical. The function of digestion, and I've repeated this every single day, I believe, the function of digestion is to take the food that we eat and break it down into molecules so small that the cells of our body can absorb that. So envision this steak, or envision this egg, or envision this piece of sourdough bread, or envision this apple. And our body's goal through the process of digestion is to break down that apple, break down that steak, break down that egg, break down that sourdough bread into molecules so small that they can be absorbed by our cells. And the nutrients can be absorbed by the cells and used by the cells. Okay? Well, if the nutrients aren't there, what are the cells supposed to use? They'll do the best they can, but they're not going to create this Rembrandt with watercolors from the five and dime. Okay, makes sense? You have to have good nutrient dense food to put in the body in order for the body to produce health. Okay, and nowhere is that as important to remember as with today's topic. Today we're going to be talking about meats, properly sourced meats, and we're going to be talking about meats in season. Now, we don't typically think of meats as having a season, but if you think about traditional cultures, they do. But first, let's talk about properly sourced food, properly sourced meats, okay? Now, we talked a little bit about properly sourcing our eggs, because if what you're feeding the chicken isn't what they're wanting to eat. I mentioned before that chickens are not vegetarians, okay? They do eat some grain, but they eat bugs and they eat insects and they eat worms and they eat snakes if you let them, right? And so we've talked a little bit about that when it comes to the egg, but now let's think about that when it comes to the chicken. If you're not, just like with us, okay, garbage in, garbage out, if we eat crummy stuff, we're not going to be healthy. Well, if we feed the animals that we're going to be eating crummy stuff, they're not going to be healthy. So typically, cows graze on pasture. They eat grass. Hi, Allison. Good to see you. Thanks for joining me. Typically, cows graze on pasture. Okay, they eat some bugs in the pasture too. Okay. They don't eat it. They eat some grain, but not a lot. I mean, it's usually toward the end of the season when the grasses are starting to grain out, right? So typically cows will eat pasture. And doing that allows them to be healthy in their cowness, okay? But unfortunately, in today's, they're called confinement cattle, but in today's typical processing of meats and growing of meats, things have changed. And so we're feeding cows more grains. And the more grain you introduce to a cow's diet, the more bacteria you introduce to their gut and to their body, unfriendly bacteria. They're kept in big barns on concrete floors. And even the dairy cattle, I mean, that's important when it comes to dairy too. But one of the statistics I read was that traditionally, dairy cows could go through 8 to 10 lactations or 8 to 10 births, about a 10 to 12-year lifespan. And that now conventional cows on average go through 1.8. And then those downer cows are harvested and sent to the butcher for us to consume. That's quite a difference in lifespan if you think about it, to go from 8 to 10 births to less than 2 on average. And not only are the confinement cattle being given, I mean, they're being confined in a barn with no sunlight, right, on concrete floors, but they're given antibiotics, they're given hormones, they're given steroids, all to help them produce more. And one of the reasons for, especially for beef cattle, to give them grain is to fatten them up. And because there's such a desire lately for grass-fed beef, some farmers will say that their cows are grass-fed. They keep them on grass, but then the last 3 to 4 months of their life, they put them in stockades and feed them grain to fatten them up. Well, we have a farmer that we use, a rancher that we use, and he just lets them go on pasture. Now, traditionally, cows ate pasture during the summer months. In the winter months, they had silage, which is fermented grass, and they also had hay, which is dry grass, right? So they were pretty much eating not really a vegetarian diet because, like I said, in the pasture they did get bugs that they ate with the grass, but they also had exposure to the sun, and they were able to get in the dirt and actually be a cow. And so the resultant product, the cows were happier, they were healthier, they didn't need as many antibiotics. And so the product, the meat that they were eating was healthier. And so because there's such a big push nowadays for grass-fed beef as opposed to the grain-fed beef, that used to be the push a while ago, 10, 20 years ago, farmers are recognizing there's a demand for grass-fed beef. And so they'll put them on grass, except for the last 3 to 4 years or 3 to 4 months before they harvest them, and then they'll put them on grain to fatten them up. Well, the rancher that we use, I've asked him about this, and he says, well, yeah, it does take a pasture-raised cow or grass-fed cow longer to make weight. But who cares? I mean, it's not like you're buying anything to feed them. They're on grass. They're eating the pasture. So it's not really costing me anything to let them stay in the mountain, on the mountain pasture for a couple more months. I just let them do their thing, and when they make weight, then we can harvest them. And I love that philosophy, because when you're letting the cows range on pasture up in the mountains, it's really not costing the rancher anything. He just has to wait a little bit longer for the cow to make weight. Now, the other thing that's really interesting, as we've talked about healthy fats, is that especially with cows, when cows are fed their natural diet of grass, and they're allowed to be out there on pasture eating in the sun, they have higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids, which is the ones that typically you get from fish, and they have lower range of the omega-6s. And you actually want to have a balance. But cows that are fed primarily in the conventionally grown, they have higher omega-6s, and their omega-3s are next to nothing. So pasture-raised cows are actually have a healthier fat ratio. They have healthier types of fats, and they're actually just better for you. They are leaner than cows raised on grains, but that's to be expected too, and that's okay. I just throw a little bit of butter on my steak. And eat it that way. Now, the same thing goes for chickens. We mentioned chickens earlier. You want chickens that are allowed to forage. You want chickens that are allowed to be out there and be a chicken in the sun, and actually not have to have the antibiotics and not have the hormones. And you want pigs or pork that's been allowed to be out there and forage and rut the way that pigs are supposed to. And you want fish that's wild caught. You don't want fish that have been raised in farms, because when they raise them in farms, they start to give them things that fish don't typically eat. And we've talked a little bit about this throughout the whole series, so I'm not gonna go into it a lot, but I want you to just think about, there used to be a saying, you are what you eat. Well, now we need to go beyond that, okay? And I want you to think about how we are what we eats. So if you're eating beef from a cow that's been in a barn his whole life, standing on concrete floors, being fed soybean and GMO corn and donuts, because stale donuts because they're day old, and who else knows? I mean, I've heard horror stories, and I know that not every farmer does that, but think about the kind of meat that cow is going to be producing. In fact, I read this, one article that I read said the statistics were that I think it was less than 10% of the livers from confinement cattle could be harvested because the cows were so sick. Okay, I read an article that the chickens were so sick that if there's pus inside, you're not supposed to harvest them, or you can harvest them, but you're not supposed to sell them. And yet one guy said that at the farm, if the pus wasn't too bad, they could harvest the wing or the breast, and they could harvest part of the wings. Well, that's not the kind of cow or chicken or pig that I want to eat. I want to eat beef from a cow that's had a happy life, that's been raised eating what it's meant to be eating, so that it's healthier, and so that the health, so I don't have to worry about garbage in, garbage out. I can get a cow that's filled with nutrients and healthy fats, because that's going to give me good nutrients and healthy fats. Does that make sense? So ideally, we should be eating cows that have been raised in pasture. They're grass-fed and grass-finished cows. That's what we want to be looking for, grass-fed and grass-finished. Okay. Now, cows can have a little bit of grain, but primarily grass-fed, grass-finished. We want chickens that have been raised on pasture that we're eating, not just the eggs. Obviously, we already talked about the eggs. We want the eggs to be from chickens that are on pasture. But if we're harvesting chickens, we want to eat chicken that's been raised on pasture in the sun, right? We want to eat pork where the pig has been able to be outside in the sun. In fact, the lard from pork that have been allowed to be outside has more nutrients than lard from pigs that have been kept in a barn. Okay, so we're talking about naturally raised animals. Okay, now the other thing that I want you to kind of think about is eating in season. And we usually talk about eating in season when it comes to fruits and vegetables, and that's absolutely right. But when you think about the traditional harvest time, when did they traditionally harvest cows? Cows were traditionally harvested in the fall, and then they had beef all winter long to eat because they either froze it or they salted it, right? Pigs are harvested also in the fall. Chickens kind of go through, I think, well, chickens go through a harvest time. Here we usually do it in the springtime or in the early summer once they've gotten to the point where we can find out which are going to be the layers, and we can pull out some of the old layers and harvest them, or we've got too many of hens or too many roosters, we can harvest those. So we kind of go through a harvest time, a natural harvest time for chicken or poultry in the late spring or in the early summer, right? Turkey, usually the turkey harvest or the turkey hunt is in the fall. Okay. Salmon, I know the normal salmon run, at least in Washington, is late May, June, early July. Okay. Summertime, we're eating fish because we're fishing out of the lakes. You can do some ice fishing, obviously, and have some fish in the winter too. But one of the neat things about eating in season is that you're going to get more of the nutrients that your body needs at that time. You're going to be eating more locally as well. And one of the ways that that's really important is that when you eat beef, the natural digestive process creates heat, so you're warmer. So it makes sense to be eating beef in the fall and the winter when you're going to want to generate heat. Whereas if you think about eating a salad, I don't know about you, but I don't really get hankerings for salad in the middle of winter. Spring, summer, a little bit in the fall, yeah, there are times I'm like, boy, a salad really sounds good. In the winter time, sometimes I'll be like, okay, yeah, I could go for a salad, but I don't really get that, oh, I really want a salad today, because usually in the winter time, my body needs to generate heat. So I'm wanting that steak or that roast and those starchy vegetables. Does that make sense? So when you're eating in season, you're giving your body what it needs at that time in order to have the nutrients it needs in order to stay healthy. Now, it's interesting that's kind of the cycle, because most religions have a health code that they live by, or that they present to their congregation. And in our church, we do too. Our health code is called the Word of Wisdom. And the Word of Wisdom says to eat meat sparingly and primarily when it's cold. Okay, so that doesn't mean that I never have a steak in the summer. Yes, there are times that a nice grilled steak on the grill with a big tossed salad sounds really good. But that does mean that I'm more likely to get the benefits that I need from meat when I eat it in the evenings. Okay, or not in the evening, sorry, in the winter. So I hope that makes sense. I know that this might be kind of a challenge for some of you, okay, and not so much a challenge on perhaps not a challenge on adjusting what you eat or when you eat it, but finding properly sourced. Because what you find in the grocery store, sometimes you can find pasture or grass-fed and grass-finished beef. Sometimes you can find pasture-raised chicken or pasture-raised pork or wild-caught fish. You can look for that. But it's not always that easy to find. So I'm going to put some sources in the comments for you so that you can find that. But your challenge for today, step 8, is to begin eating naturally raised meats and fish and poultry, okay? And to start thinking about eating in season. Now, I'm not going to say don't have fish in the winter. We have salmon in the winter. In fact, we just had a lovely salmon, Alaska salmon, for dinner last night. And I'm not going to say that I never have steak in the summer, because I do. We like to grill. I personally, Troy likes ribeye. I like New York strip, and we'll grill those on the grill in the summer. But the majority of your meats, okay, try eating those in the winter when your body is hankering, or when your body's craving that. And the majority of the fish, try eating that in the summer, just so that you're eating more in season and giving your body the nutrients it needs at that time to be healthy, okay? Your challenge is to begin eating properly sourced meats. So finding grass-fed, grass-finished beef, finding pasture-raised chicken, finding pasture-raised pork and if it's going to be cured, have it be naturally cured. And the label might say uncured bacon or uncured ham, and ask questions, because it could be traditionally cured, but the FDA doesn't allow them to call it cured anymore because they're not using chemicals, okay? So your challenge is to find proper sources, natural sources for your meats, and so that you can get all the nutrient-dense goodness from the meat that you're eating. I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments. Tomorrow's topic, I'll be back tomorrow, back at 10 o'clock. Today, remember, I had to watch Dean, so that was fun. What else do I want to tell you about today's topic? Just naturally sourced. It's a simple one, finding the right source. And I'll put some sources in the comments for you so that hopefully you can find local sources. Ask around. When you're looking for a source, what we typically do, we will buy either a fourth of a cow or a half a cow from a farmer that we know how he raises his animals. We know that they're raised on pasture. We know that they're not given antibiotics. We know that they're not given hormones. We know how they're raised, okay? We buy our chickens from someone that we know how they raise their chickens. Same thing with the pork. We buy our fish from someone that we know that, I mean, he's getting it right from the ocean. Or, you know, we get Alaskan salmon from someone that's there, and then they'll ship it to us. So that actually brings another component to this whole thing. Know your sources. Know where you're getting. Don't have it be some faceless person at the store. Not that we never buy something from the store, but it's very little. We'll buy a cow or half a cow from somebody that we know and stick it in our freezer, okay? So start getting to know your sources. Be aware of how your food is raised. Be aware of what your food is eating, because what your food eats is going to affect the quality of the food. And then it's going to affect the nutrient availability for you. And so I mentioned, we're not what we eat. We are what we eats. So be aware of what you're eating and what it has eaten, what its life was like. And I think you'll be surprised at how much better the food tastes and how much better you feel, not just from a social standpoint of knowing that you're doing good for the environment or for the animals, but also because of the nutrient richness, nutrient denseness in the food, you will feel better. So thank you for joining me today. This is a simple one, but it might be a little bit of a challenge to find properly sourced meat. So I'm going to put some sources in the comments, and I'm going to give you some questions that you can ask the farmers, so that when you're talking to farmers or when you're looking online, I'm going to give you a quick source. One good place to look is the local classifieds. And for my family and friends in Michigan, There's lots of farmers nearby. Just get to know them. Find out what they're feeding their animals. And then find out if you can buy a half a cow or a fourth a cow or whatever, depending on your family size, or even a whole cow. Buy a cow, have them feed it the way you want it fed, and then no antibiotics and no steroids and no hormones and things like that. So really get involved in the food that you're eating, rather than having it be a faceless animal that you pick up from a package in the grocery store. Really get involved in your food, and you'll be healthier, and I think you'll really enjoy your food more. So thank you very much for joining me today for day 8 and step 8 of 10 days to real food and a healthier you. If you're loving the stuff that I'm sharing with you, please give me some love. Give me some love. Let me know that you're there so that I know that you're listening. If you have questions, put them in the comments. I'm going to add some sources to the comments for you. I'll be back tomorrow at 10 o'clock Mountain Time. So if you're in Wisconsin, that's going to be 11 o'clock. If you're in Michigan, that's going to be 12 o'clock. If you're in Europe, that's going to be 6 p.m. Okay, I've got some friends from Germany in here too, and it's fun to see them join in. So I will be back tomorrow at 10 o'clock my time. I will have more information on the Restart program, which is that 5-week nutrition education class that I've talked about that has the 3-week sugar detox built right in. Love that class. I seriously think that everybody should take that class at least once. And we've taken it several times because I teach it, but Troy likes it so much that he's joined in several times too. So thank you very much, guys. So good seeing you. Thank you for joining me. And I'm looking forward to the comments. I'm looking forward to the love, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.